Lisa Carter sat in the cold metal chair and watched the other ambassadors talk. The Galactic Council chamber was huge and filled with beings from 20 different worlds. Some had blue skin, others had 6 arms, and a few looked like giant insects. They all seemed very pleased with themselves today. The vote had just finished. Resolution 847 Alpha passed with flying colors. Humans could not expand beyond their 12 colony worlds anymore. They could not develop new weapons or advanced technology without council approval. The restrictions were harsh and complete. Lisa looked at the voting board. 18 species voted yes. Only 1 voted no. The humans had voted against their own. Punishment, but it did not matter. Democracy had spoken. The Terran Federation accepts the council's decision, Lisa said. Her voice was calm and steady. She stood up from her chair and smoothed down her blue diplomatic uniform. Behind her, General Kevin Brooks and Dr. Amanda White did the same. None of them looked angry or upset. The Valthani ambassador, a tall being with silver skin, seemed surprised. "That is all?" he asked. "No protests? No demands for another vote?" Lisa shook her head. "We respect the will of the council. We will begin our withdrawal immediately." The Cortex representative, who looked like a massive turtle, laughed. "Finally, the humans show some wisdom. Perhaps this restriction will teach them humility." Lisa did not reply. She gathered her papers and walked toward the exit. Kevin and Amanda followed her. Their footsteps echoed in the silent chamber. The other ambassadors watched them leave, already talking among themselves about other matters. Outside the chamber, Kevin turned to Lisa. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. "Orders are orders," Lisa replied. "We pack up and go home." Within 2 hours, every human ship in Council space received the same message. Return to Terran territory immediately. End all trade agreements. Cancel all joint projects. No explanations were needed or given. Captain Jake Morrison was loading cargo on his ship, New Horizon, when the message came through. He had been trading with the Valthani for 15 years. His ship carried medical supplies, rare metals, and food products between human and alien worlds. The Valthani merchants he worked with had become good friends. "Sorry, folks," Jake told his alien business partners. "Got to head home right now." Velthur, a Valthani trader with purple spots on his silver skin, looked confused. "But we have 3 more shipments scheduled this month. The medicine for our children's hospital arrives tomorrow." Jake unplugged his ship from the station's power grid. "Find another supplier. We're done here." The same scene played out across the galaxy. Human doctors left alien hospitals in the middle of surgeries. Human engineers walked away from half-built space stations. Human teachers abandoned their alien students. Human mechanics left broken ships UNFIXED. Dr. Betty Ross had been working on Zephyrian Prime for 8 years. She ran the Council's main medical research center there. Her team had developed cures for dozens of diseases that affected multiple alien species. When the withdrawal order came, she simply packed her research and left. "You cannot leave now," said Dr. Silthara, her Zephyrian assistant. "We are so close to finishing the cure for the red fever. Millions of lives depend on this work." Betty sealed the last of her personal files into a secure container. "The Council has made their choice. Good luck with your research." The Zephyrian doctor watched in shock as Betty deleted all her work from the station's computers. Years of medical breakthroughs vanished in seconds. "Why are you destroying everything?" "This is human research done by human scientists," Betty said. "The Council wants to limit human technology development. This technology stays with humans." Captain Roy Foster commanded the largest human shipping company in the galaxy. His fleet of cargo ships carried goods between 47 different star systems. The aliens called his company Human Logistics and depended on it to move everything. From food to machine parts across space. Roy sent the same message to all his ship captains. Return to Earth space immediately. Cancel all contracts. Suspend all operations in Council territory. His assistant, a young human woman named Grace Webb, looked worried. Sir, if we stop our deliveries, some colonies will run out of food. Others need medical supplies. Roy shrugged. Not our problem anymore. The Council thinks humans are too dangerous to expand or develop new technology. Let them handle their own supply lines. The withdrawal was fast and complete. Human space stations went dark. Human research facilities locked their doors. Human trading posts closed without warning. In 3 days, nearly every human in Council space had packed up and left. Most aliens barely noticed at first. Humans had always been the quiet workers. They fixed things when they broke. They delivered goods when needed. They solved problems without making noise about it. They were like the air you breathe, invisible until it was gone. The Valthani Council of Elders met to discuss the human withdrawal. Elder Morthic, an ancient being with golden skin, seemed pleased. Finally, we are free of human interference. Now we can govern the galaxy properly. Elder Sylvana was less certain. Perhaps we were too harsh. The humans did provide many useful services. Services we can provide for ourselves, Morthic replied. We managed the galaxy for thousands of years before humans arrived. We will manage it for thousands more after they leave. On Corthex Prime, the massive industrial world that produced most of the Council's manufactured goods, Administrator Vexthyla reviewed production reports. Human engineers had designed many of the automated factories there. Human technicians maintained the complex quantum processors that turned raw materials into finished products. How long before we can replace the human workers? Vexthyla asked. His staff. The humans left detailed manuals and computer programs, replied his chief engineer. We should be able to maintain current production levels with minimal disruption. Vexthyla nodded approvingly. The Corthex were master engineers themselves. How hard could it be to run factories that humans had built? In deep space, human ships moved toward the galaxy's outer rim. They traveled in large groups, carrying entire families and all their possessions. The ships were packed with everything humans had built or discovered during their 70 years in Shin. Council Space. Lisa Carter stood on the bridge of the Diplomatic, vessel Earth's voice, and watched the stars change. They were heading for territory beyond Council control, toward worlds that had never been explored. Any regrets? Asked General Kevin Brooks. Lisa smiled for the first time in days. None at all. We gave them our best for 70 years. We built their infrastructure, solved their problems, and protected them from threats they never even knew existed. In return, they treated us like dangerous children who needed constant supervision. Dr. Amanda White joined them at the observation window. The Council thinks they were managing us. They never realized we were managing them. The human ships continued their journey toward unknown space. Behind them, they left a galaxy that thought it could function without them. The Council species celebrated their victory over human ambition. They had no idea what was coming. Within weeks, the first problems would begin. Systems would fail. Trade routes would collapse. Threats that humans had quietly handled would emerge. From the darkness, the galaxy would learn the difference between thinking you are in control and actually being in control. But for now, the humans simply flew toward their new future, leaving the Council to discover what they had really done. 3 months passed since the last human ship left Council space. Life continued as normal for most aliens. They went to work, raised their families, and conducted business across the galaxy. The absence of humans felt like a minor change, barely. Worth mentioning and the problem started. The first sign of trouble came from Cortex Prime. The massive orbital factories that produced starship parts began having strange malfunctions. Machines that had run perfectly for decades suddenly started producing defective components. The quantum processors that shaped raw metal into complex starship hulls began creating pieces with microscopic flaws. Engineer Danny Taylor had been the human responsible for calibrating these machines. Every 6 months, he would adjust the quantum resonance frequencies to account for changes in a local space-time field. The process required an understanding of 17 different types of physics and took 3 days of constant work. Vexthala, the Cortex administrator, stood in the main factory and watched his workers struggle with the calibration controls. "How difficult can this be?" he asked his chief engineer. "The humans left us all their manuals and computer programs." The Cortex engineer, a being with a shell-like body and 6 arms, manipulated several control panels at once. "The manuals explain what to do, but not why to do it. The quantum fields keep shifting in ways we do not understand." Vexthala looked at the production charts. Output had dropped by 30% in the past month. Defective parts were being shipped to shipyards across the galaxy. "Keep trying. We cannot let the other species think the Cortex are incompetent." Meanwhile, on Zephyrian Prime, Dr. Silthara faced a medical crisis that would test everything she thought she knew. A new virus had appeared in the outer colonies, one that affected 3 different alien species at the same time. The symptoms were deadly and spreading fast. Dr. Betty Ross had developed the standard treatment protocols for cross-species diseases. Her research center had handled dozens of similar outbreaks over the years. The procedures seemed simple enough. Identify the pathogen, test it against known treatments, and develop a cure. But when Dr. Silthara tried to follow the procedures, nothing worked. The virus mutated too quickly for standard treatments. The testing equipment gave confusing results. The computer models that Dr. Ross had used to predict disease behavior no longer made sense. "Contact Dr. Ross immediately," Silthara ordered. "Her staff. We need her expertise." Her assistant, a young Zephyrian with green-tinted skin, looked uncomfortable. "Dr. Ross is no longer in council space. The human government has blocked all communication with their former personnel." Silthara felt a chill run through her body. Without Dr. Ross's knowledge, thousands of beings would die. The research notes left behind contained the basic procedures, but the crucial insights existed only in the human doctor's mind. Across the galaxy, similar problems were emerging. The Valthani discovered that their exotic matter refineries were producing contaminated fuel. The complex purification process required constant adjustments that their technicians did not understand. Chris Bell and his human team had handled these adjustments for 20 years, making tiny changes that prevented catastrophic explosions. Without proper fuel, Valthani starships began experiencing engine failures. 3 passenger vessels became stranded between star systems, their crews forced to send distress calls to nearby worlds. The Valthani had always prided themselves on having the most advanced ships in the galaxy. Now their fleet was breaking down. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for decades began falling apart. Captain Roy Foster's company, Human Logistics, had established supply chains that connected 47 star systems. They knew which worlds produced what goods, when to ship them, and how to navigate the complex web of alien politics that governed. Interstellar Commerce, the Council's own logistics department, tried to take over these routes. They had access to all the shipping schedules and cargo manifests that the humans had left behind. Everything seemed straightforward on paper, but reality proved different. A shipment of grain intended for a Cortex mining colony was accidentally sent to a Valthani research station. Medical supplies meant for a Zephyrian hospital ended up at a military base on the other side of the galaxy. Cargo ships arrived at destinations with the wrong goods, or no goods at all. Within 2 months, food shortages appeared on 17 different worlds. Manufacturing centers ran out of raw materials. Research stations could not get the specialized equipment they needed. The seamless flow of goods that had kept the galaxy running had become a chaotic mess. On Zentara Prime, the Council's capital world, Supreme Leader Corphalin received increasingly desperate reports from across their territory. The being who led the galaxy's most powerful government looked like a cross between a bird and a lizard, with bright blue feathers and sharp claws. He had ruled for 30 years and considered himself wise in the ways of managing different species. Surely, these problems are temporary, he told his advisors. We simply need time to adjust to the new situation. His economic advisor, a Valfani named Morthic, shook his silver head. The disruptions are getting worse, not better. Our trade networks have lost 25% of their efficiency. Industrial production is down across all sectors. What about the human manuals and computer programs they left behind? Corphalin asked. They are incomplete, replied his military advisor, a massive Cortex general. The humans documented what they did, but not how they thought about problems. We can follow their procedures, but we cannot adapt when circumstances change. Corphalin felt a small seed of worry growing in his mind. The restrictions placed on humanity had been meant to prevent them from becoming too powerful. The Council had feared that human expansion and technological development would threaten the established order. But what if humans had been part of that established order all along? On the outer rim of Council space, the defense monitoring stations began reporting strange readings. These automated systems watched for threats from outside the galaxy, hostile aliens, dangerous space phenomena, or rogue asteroids that might threaten inhabited worlds. The monitoring network had been designed by Commander Tyler Bell and his human engineering team. They had built redundant sensors, sophisticated analysis programs, and rapid response protocols that could handle any type of threat. The system had prevented dozens of disasters over the years, usually without anyone knowing danger had existed. The system was malfunctioning. Sensors gave conflicting readings. Analysis programs crashed when processing unusual data. The rapid response protocols that should have activated automatically remained silent. A massive asteroid, large enough to destroy a city, was heading toward the Zephyrian homeworld. The monitoring system detected it, but could not calculate its trajectory properly. The warning that should have given the Zephyrians 6 months to prepare reached them with only 6 weeks to spare. Panic spread through the Zephyrian government. They had weapons capable of destroying the asteroid, but not enough time to position them properly. Evacuation ships scrambled to move 3 billion people away from the impact zone. The economic cost would be enormous, the social disruption catastrophic. The Council's emergency response team managed to destroy the asteroid just days before impact. But the near disaster exposed how vulnerable they had become. Commander Tyler Bell's team would have spotted this threat months earlier and dealt with it quietly, without panic or massive evacuations. As the 4th month of human absence began, the truth was becoming clear to anyone willing to see it. The galaxy had not been functioning despite human involvement. It had been functioning because of human involvement. The aliens had been passengers on a ship they thought they were driving, but pride prevented most council leaders from admitting their mistake. They continued to insist that the problems were temporary, that alien expertise would soon replace human knowledge. They convinced themselves that they were still in control, even as their civilization began to crack around them. The humans, meanwhile, had vanished into the unexplored regions beyond council space. No one knew where they had gone or what they were doing. The galaxy's communications networks, which humans had helped design and maintain, could no longer reach the outer rim where the human ships had disappeared. Soon, the cracks would become breaks, and the breaks would become collapse. The Council would learn what humans had really been doing all those years, holding their civilization together with quiet competence and unrecognized skill. 6 months had passed since the human exodus began. What started as minor problems had grown into major crises across Council space. Systems that had run smoothly for decades were failing in ways that no one understood. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations found themselves helpless against challenges they had never faced before. The asteroid crisis at Zephyrian Prime had been just the beginning. The defense network's failure to detect the threat early had exposed a critical weakness in the Council's security systems. But the real shock came when they tried to understand why the system had failed. Commander Tyler Bell had designed the early warning network using principles that seemed simple on the surface. Sensors monitored space for unusual objects. Computer programs analyzed the data. When threats were detected, response teams would be automatically notified. The humans had left detailed technical manuals explaining every component, but the manuals did not explain the subtle adjustments that Tyler's team made every few weeks. They did not document the intuitive leaps that human minds made when interpreting sensor data. They did not capture the creative problem-solving that let humans spot threats that computers missed. The Cortex engineers, assigned to maintain the defense network, found themselves drowning in data they could not interpret. Their logical minds could follow the technical procedures perfectly, but they lacked the human ability to see patterns in chaos, to spot the one dangerous asteroid among a million harmless rocks. The humans must have had access to superior sensor technology, concluded General Northick, the Cortex military leader. That is the only explanation for their success. His staff nodded in agreement. It was easier to assume human superiority came from better tools rather than better thinking. The alternative, that humans might be naturally better at certain types of problem-solving, was too uncomfortable to consider. Meanwhile, the medical crisis on Zephyrian Prime had become a full epidemic. The virus that Dr. Betty Ross might have contained in weeks had spread to 12 different star systems. Millions of beings were infected, and the death toll was rising daily. Dr. Silthara had tried everything she could think of. She had studied every research paper that Dr. Ross had published. She had followed every procedure in the medical protocols. She had consulted with the best doctors from 6 different species. Nothing worked. The virus seemed to adapt every treatment they tried. It jumped between species in ways that should have been impossible. It mutated so quickly that by the time they developed a cure for one strain, 3 new strains had already appeared. Dr. Ross made this look easy, Silthara told her exhausted research team. She handled outbreaks like this dozens of times. What are we missing? Her assistant, a young Zephyrian named Velther, had been studying Dr. Ross's old research videos. Look at this, he said, pointing to a screen showing the human doctor at work. She is not just following procedures. She is thinking ahead, predicting how the virus will change before it actually changes. Silthara watched the video carefully. Dr. Ross moved through her laboratory with confidence and purpose, making adjustments to treatments based on subtle clues that the alien doctors could not even see. She seemed to understand the virus on an intuitive level that went beyond scientific analysis. She is treating the virus like a living opponent, Silthara realized. Not just a biological process to be analyzed, but an enemy to be outmaneuvered. The revelation came too late to help the millions who were already infected. The Council's medical response had failed, and the epidemic continued to spread. Entire colonies were quarantined, their populations dying while alien doctors struggled to match human intuition with alien logic. On Valthani Prime, the situation had become equally desperate. The exotic matter refineries that powered their advanced civilization were experiencing cascade failures. The complex purification process that Chris Bell's team had managed for 20 years was breaking down in catastrophic ways. Exotic matter was the most dangerous substance in the galaxy. When properly refined, it could power starships that traveled faster than light. When improperly handled, it could destroy entire star systems. The Valthani had built their technological superiority on their ability to mass-produce this dangerous fuel safely, but that safety had always depended on human expertise. Chris Bell and his engineers had developed techniques for handling exotic matter that went far beyond anything in the technical manuals. They had learned to read the subtle signs that warned of impending disaster, changes in color, temperature, and energy output that preceded catastrophic explosions. The Valthani. Technicians who replaced them could operate the machinery, but they could not sense danger the way humans could. 3 refineries had already suffered minor explosions. A 4th had been shut down completely when warning systems detected conditions that might lead to a planet-killing blast. "We must contact the human Chris Bell," declared Eldon Morthek during an emergency meeting of the Valthani Council. "Offer him whatever he wants to return and help us." Elder Silvana, who had opposed the restrictions on humanity, shook her silver head sadly. "The humans have blocked all communication from Council space. They will not answer our calls." The Valthani were learning the same lesson as the Zephyrians and Korthex. Human competence had not come from superior technology or secret knowledge. It had come from ways of thinking that aliens could not easily replicate. Humans saw patterns differently, solved problems differently, and adapted to change differently. As the crisis deepened, the economic disruption spread throughout Council space. The carefully balanced trade networks that Captain Roy Foster's company had maintained were collapsing under the weight of accumulated errors. Ships carried the wrong cargo to the wrong destinations. Colonies ran out of essential supplies, while warehouses on other worlds overflowed with goods that no one needed. Council's logistics department had hired thousands of new workers to replace human logistics. They had the best computers, the most detailed shipping schedules, and access to all the trade agreements that the humans had negotiated over 70 years. On paper, everything should have worked perfectly, but trade was more than moving goods from one place to another. It required understanding the subtle relationships between different worlds, the seasonal patterns of production and consumption, and the political factors that could disrupt commerce without warning. Human traders like Roy Foster had built personal relationships with suppliers and customers across the galaxy. They knew which worlds were reliable, which officials could be trusted, and which routes were safe during different times of the year. Alien logistics workers had no such knowledge. They treated trade like a mathematical equation to be solved, rather than a complex web of relationships to be managed. When problems arose, they followed procedures instead of adapting to circumstances. When procedures failed, they had no backup plans. The result was chaos. Food riots broke out on 17 different worlds as essential supplies failed to arrive. Industrial production ground to a halt as factories could not get the raw materials they needed. Research projects were abandoned as scientists could not obtain specialized equipment. On Zentara Prime, Supreme Leader Corthalin faced the worst crisis of his 30-year reign. His advisors brought him reports of system failures, economic collapse, and social unrest from across the galaxy. The being who had once believed himself to be the wise ruler of a stable civilization now felt like a passenger on a ship that was sinking in slow motion. How could the departure of one species cause so much disruption? He asked his council. His economic advisor, Morthek, spread holographic charts across the conference table. "We underestimated how deeply integrated humans were into our infrastructure. They were not just workers. They were the nervous system that coordinated our entire civilization. But they were only 3% of the total population in Council space, protested the military advisor. Surely the other 97% should be able to function without them. Corthalan stared at the charts showing declining production, failed supply chains, and spreading chaos. The mathematics seemed impossible, but the evidence was undeniable. A tiny minority of humans had somehow been essential to keeping the galaxy's majority of aliens functioning. Send envoys to the Outer Rim, he ordered. Find the humans and negotiate their return. Offer them better terms, more autonomy, whatever they want. But his diplomatic advisor, an elderly Zephyrian named Silkara, shook her head. Our long-range communications cannot reach the Outer Rim. The relay stations that would carry our messages were maintained by human technicians. Without regular calibration, they have gone offline. The irony was bitter. The Council could not even contact humans to beg for their return because human expertise was needed to maintain the communication systems that would carry the message. They had cut themselves off from the very people they desperately needed. As the crisis entered its 7th month, some Council members began to voice what everyone was thinking, but no one wanted to say. The restrictions on humanity had been a catastrophic mistake. The humans had not been a threat to galactic stability. They had been the foundation that made galactic stability possible. 8 months after the human departure, the Galactic Council called an emergency session. The grand chamber that had once been filled with confident debates about governing the galaxy now buzzed with desperate whispers about survival. Representatives from 20 species gathered to face a truth that none of them wanted to acknowledge. Supreme Leader Corthalan stood at the central podium, his blue feathers dulled with stress and exhaustion. The reports from across Council space painted a picture of civilization in collapse. Industrial production had dropped by 60%. Trade networks had failed completely on 12 different star systems. The medical epidemic that started on Zephyrian Prime had now spread to 34 worlds. We must contact the humans, Corthalan announced to the assembly. Pride is a luxury we can no longer afford. Elder Morthic of the Valthani stood up from his delegation section. The humans have blocked all communication from Council space. They refuse to speak with us. Then we must find them, Corthalan replied. Send our best scouts to locate their new territories. We will negotiate face-to-face if necessary. The idea seemed simple enough. Humans had left Council space 8 months ago, traveling toward the galaxy's outer rim. They could not have gone far with their limited technology. A few scout ships should be able to track them down within weeks, but the reality proved much more difficult. The humans had not simply moved to empty worlds. They had vanished completely from all known space. The communication relay stations that might have tracked their ships had failed without human maintenance. The long-range sensors that should have spotted human settlements could no longer function properly. The Council authorized a massive search operation. 50 of their fastest ships would sweep the outer rim, searching every star system for signs of human activity. The mission was led by the Zephyrian spy master Silthara, considered the best intelligence gatherer in the galaxy. Silthara had tracked enemy fleets through interstellar space, located hidden bases on barren worlds, and uncovered secret treaties between hostile governments. Finding one group of human refugees should have been a simple task for someone with her skills. Her scout fleet departed Centaura Prime with great fanfare and high expectations. They carried advanced sensors, deep space communication equipment, and enough supplies for a year-long search. The Council's leaders watched them leave with hope that their civilization might yet be saved. The search began in the regions closest to human space. Silthara's ships visited every habitable world within 50 light-years of the human border. They found nothing. No settlements, no ships, no signs that humans had ever passed through these systems. Perhaps they went farther than we expected. suggested Commander Velthok, Silthara's second in command. Humans were always ambitious. They might have traveled hundreds of light years from their original territory. Silthara expanded the search grid, pushing deeper into unexplored space. Her ships encountered strange new worlds, primitive alien species, and cosmic phenomena that had never been catalogued. But they found no trace of the missing humans. Weeks turned into months as the search continued. Silthara began to worry that the humans might have left the galaxy entirely, perhaps traveling to one of the smaller satellite galaxies that orbited their own. Such a journey would be incredibly dangerous with human technology, but desperation might have driven them to attempt it. Then, in the 4th month of the search, everything changed. Silthara's flagship was investigating a seemingly empty star system when her sensors detected something impossible. The readings showed a massive space station in orbit around the system's 3rd planet. The station was larger than anything in Council space, built with technology that the sensors could not identify. "Are we looking at the readings correctly?" Silthara asked her sensor operator. The young Zephyrian checked his instruments twice before responding. "The data is accurate, Commander. That station is approximately 10 times larger than our biggest orbital platform. The construction materials appear to be some form of crystalline metal that our databases cannot identify." Silthara ordered her ship to approach carefully. As they drew closer, more impossible sights appeared on their screens. The planet below was covered with gleaming cities that stretched from pole to pole. Thousands of ships moved through the system, designs that were clearly human, but unlike any human vessels that had ever been seen before. "Commander," the communications officer called out urgently, "we are being scanned by multiple sources. The scanning technology is far more advanced than anything we possess." Before Silthara could respond, her ship's main screen activated. The face of a human woman appeared, someone the spy master recognized from intelligence files. Captain Amy. Clark had been a human exploration fleet commander, known for her aggressive expansion into unmapped territories. "Zephyrian vessel, you are in Terran Federation space," Amy said calmly. "State your business here." Silthara stepped forward, trying to hide her shock at seeing human technology that surpassed anything the Council possessed. "I am Commander Silthara of the Galactic Council. We seek to establish communication with the Terran Federation leadership." Amy's expression did not change. "The Terran Federation has no formal relations with the Galactic Council. However, I will pass your message to the appropriate authorities. Please remain in your current position while we decide how to respond." The communication ended, leaving Silthara and her crew staring at readings that challenged everything they thought they knew about human capabilities. In 8 months, humans had not just established new colonies, they had built a space-based civilization that dwarfed anything in Council space. Hours passed before the humans responded. When the screen activated again, it showed a different face. Dr. Paul Young had been a terraforming specialist before the human exodus. Now he appeared to be wearing the uniform of a high-ranking government official. "Commander Silthara, Doctor," Paul said formally. "The Terran Federation is willing to grant you a brief audience. You may dock at Station Alpha 7 with a small diplomatic party. Your weapon systems must be powered down and your ship will be escorted at all times." Silthara agreed immediately. She selected 2 of her best officers and followed the human escort ships to the massive station. As her shuttle approached the docking bay, she got her first close look at human construction techniques that seemed to defy known physics. The station was built from materials that appeared to be stronger than anything in Council space. Energy flowed through conduits that glowed with soft blue light. Artificial gravity systems maintained perfect conditions without the massive generators that Council stations required. Dr. Paul met them at the airlock, accompanied by 2 human guards wearing armor that incorporated technology Silthara could not identify. He led them through corridors that were both beautiful and functional, decorated with art from dozens of different worlds. "Impressive," Silthara said, trying to sound casual. "You have accomplished much in 8 months." Dr. Paul smiled slightly. 8 months in this region of space. We have been preparing for expansion beyond Council territory for much longer than that. They entered a conference room with a large window that looked out onto space. Through the transparent wall, Silthara could see hundreds of human ships engaged in construction projects. Some were building new stations, others were transforming asteroids into mining platforms, and still others were conducting surveys of nearby star systems. "The Galactic Council wishes to discuss the possibility of renewed cooperation," Silthara began carefully. "We have experienced some difficulties since your departure and believe that mutual assistance would benefit both our peoples." Dr. Paul's expression remained neutral. What sort of difficulties? Silthara had prepared for this question, but found herself reluctant to reveal the full extent of the Council's problems. Admitting complete dependence on human expertise would destroy any negotiating position she might have. "Minor technical issues," she said diplomatically. "Some of our systems require maintenance procedures that your people developed. We would be willing to offer favorable trade agreements in exchange for technical assistance." Dr. Paul leaned back in his chair. "Commander, our long-range sensors monitor most of Council space. We are aware of the cascade failures in your industrial networks, the collapse of your supply chains, and the medical epidemic that has killed approximately 47 million beings so far." Silthara felt her diplomatic mask slipping. The humans knew exactly how desperate the Council's situation had become. Any pretense of negotiating from a position of strength was pointless. "Yes," she admitted quietly. "The situation is more serious than I initially indicated. The Council is prepared to offer significant concessions in exchange for human assistance." Dr. Paul nodded slowly. "We appreciate your honesty, Commander. However, the Terran Federation has moved beyond the constraints that once limited our development. We have formed new alliances, discovered new technologies, and established territories that span regions of space the Council has never explored." Through the window, Silthara watched a massive ship unlike anything she had ever seen. It was sleek and powerful, built with the crystalline metal that seemed to be standard in human construction now. Commander Silthara's ship arrived at Centauri Prime 12 days after her meeting with the humans. The journey back to Council space felt like traveling from the future into the past. Every system she encountered showed signs of continued deterioration. Communication relays flickered and failed. Navigation beacons broadcast incorrect coordinates. Even the basic infrastructure that kept civilization running was breaking down without human maintenance. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened within hours of Silthara's return. Representatives from all 20 member species gathered in the great chamber, their faces showing the strain of months spent watching their civilization crumble. The air was thick with desperation and barely contained panic. Supreme Leader Corthalan looked older than his years as he called the session to order. His blue feathers had lost their luster, and his sharp eyes showed the weight of decisions that had doomed his people. Around him, the other leaders displayed similar signs of stress and exhaustion. "Commander Silthara will now report on her mission to locate the human refugees," Corthalan announced to the assembly. Silthara stood at the central podium, the same place where Ambassador Lisa Carter had accepted the Council's restrictions 8 months ago. The irony was not lost on anyone present. She activated a holographic display showing the star charts from her journey and began her report. "The Terran Federation has established a space empire encompassing over 200 star systems," she began. "Their technological capabilities now exceed anything in Council space by several orders of magnitude. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the chamber. Elder Morthic of the Valthani stood up from his delegation. Impossible. Human technology was primitive compared to our own. They could not have achieved such advancement in 8 months. Silthara activated recordings from her visit to the human station. The assembled leaders watched in stunned silence, as images of impossible architecture and advanced technology filled the display. Ships that traveled by folding space itself. Construction materials that seemed to manipulate gravity. Energy systems that drew power from sources the Council could not identify. The humans have also formed an alliance with the Sindari Republic, Silthara continued. This partnership has accelerated their technological development and expanded their territorial control. General Morthic of the Korthics made a sound like grinding metal. The Sindari have not been seen in Council space for 3,000 years. They are myths, legends from the ancient past. They are very real, Silthara replied firmly. And they consider humans to be their equals. The combined territories of the Terran Sindari Alliance now encompass more space than our entire Council domain. The holographic display showed the territorial boundaries that Silthara had been able to map. The human-controlled region stretched across vast areas of previously unexplored space, dwarfing the established boundaries of Council territory. Even more disturbing, the expansion was continuing at an accelerating rate. Did they agree to provide assistance with our current difficulties? Asked Corthalin, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Silthara shook her head. The Terran Federation has no interest in resuming relations with the Galactic Council. They bear us no ill will, but they have moved beyond the constraints that Council membership imposed. They no longer need or want our approval for anything. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Council had not just lost human labor and expertise, they had lost humans entirely. The species they had tried to control had evolved beyond their reach and had become something greater than what they had been before Dr. Velsura of the Zephyrians, who had replaced Dr. Silthara as head of medical research, stood up slowly. Commander, did the humans offer any assistance with the medical epidemic that continues to spread through our territories? They are aware of the situation, Silthara replied carefully. Their medical technology appears capable of stopping the epidemic, but they have no obligation to intervene. The truth was harsher than Silthara could bring herself to state directly. The humans had monitored the epidemic's progress and could have ended it at any time. They chose not to intervene because the Council's problems were no longer there. Responsibility. The galaxy that had rejected them would have to solve its own crisis. Corthalin stood up slowly, his movements showing the weight of terrible realization. Members of the Council, we must face the truth that our pride has prevented us from acknowledging. The restrictions we placed on humanity were not a wise limitation of a dangerous species. They were the desperate actions of a failing civilization, trying to control the very people who kept us functioning. The admission sent shockwaves through the assembly. For months, the Council leadership had insisted that their problems were temporary, that alien expertise would eventually replace human knowledge. Now their supreme leader was acknowledging that the entire foundation of their civilization had been built on human competence. The evidence is undeniable, Corthalin continued, his voice growing stronger as he spoke the words that no one wanted to hear. Humans were not our subordinates. They were not junior partners in galactic governance. They were the silent architects of everything we accomplished, the invisible foundation that made our achievements possible. Elder Sylvana of the Valthani, who had opposed the restrictions from the beginning, finally spoke the words that had been on everyone's mind. We were never governing them. They were governing us. The statement hung in the air like a physical presence. The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy had been managed by the species they considered primitive. The mathematical impossibility of it 3% of the population controlling 97%, made sense only when viewed through the lens of competence rather than numbers. How is such a thing possible? Asked Administrator Vex Thala of the Corvex. We have sciences that humans never understood, technologies that they could not replicate. But they understood systems, replied Corthalan. They saw connections that we missed, patterns that we could not recognize. While we focused on individual technologies, they managed the interactions between all our technologies. The holographic display shifted to show the cascade failures that had plagued Council space since the human departure. The pattern was clear. Once you knew what to look for, every major system failure traced back to the absence of human oversight. Every collapsed supply chain had depended on human coordination. Every crisis stemmed from the loss of human problem-solving approaches. Dr. Betty Ross did not just treat diseases, Corthalan explained. She anticipated how diseases would evolve and prepared for threats that had not yet materialized. Commander Tyler Bell did not just maintain defense networks. He constantly adapted those networks to counter threats that our computers could not detect. The examples multiplied as the Council leadership finally understood what they had lost. Captain Roy Foster had not just moved cargo from one place to another. He had managed the complex relationships between suppliers and customers that kept trade flowing smoothly. Chris Bell had not just operated exotic matter refineries. He had developed an intuitive understanding of dangerous processes that prevented catastrophic accidents. Every human we thought was doing simple work was actually performing complex management tasks that we could not see, Corthalan concluded. They made our civilization possible by handling all the details that we considered beneath our notice. Dr. Velsura raised a trembling hand. If this is true, then how did they develop such capabilities? What made humans different from the rest? Of us, the question sparked intense debate among the assembled leaders. Some suggested that humans possessed unique neural structures that enhanced pattern recognition. Others theorized that human evolution had selected for cooperative problem-solving abilities that other species lacked. But Ambassador Colthera of the minor Rithani species, who had rarely spoken in council sessions, offered a different perspective. Perhaps it is not what humans possessed, but what they lacked. We are all ancient civilizations with established ways of thinking. Humans were young and flexible. They could adapt to new situations in ways that our rigid thinking patterns prevented. The suggestion was deeply unsettling. It implied that advanced age and technological sophistication might actually be disadvantages in certain circumstances. The council species had become so specialized in their own areas of expertise that they had lost the ability to think broadly about complex systems. The humans saw the galaxy as it was, not as they wanted it to be, Colthera continued. They accepted responsibility for problems that we considered someone else's concern. They fixed things because they needed to be fixed, not because fixing them brought glory or recognition. As the debate continued, reports arrived from across council space describing the continuing deterioration of their civilization. The medical epidemic had now spread to 43 star systems. Industrial production had dropped to 30% of normal levels. 3 entire colonies had been evacuated due to life support failures that no one knew how to repair.